I've spent more of my life inside the Roman army than out of it. I've been all over the place. In the north, in Gaul, in the east, to the Danube River. And since becoming a centurion, here, to the backwater province of Judea. Now, I don't hate it quite as much as my comrades do. There is the insufferable people here who want to riot even though we bring Roman civilization to them. But still, I respect their devotion to their ancient religion. There's something to be said for keeping traditions. In fact, one of my good friends, Cornelius, has even gone so far as to start worshiping this Hebrew God himself. But as for me, I gave up believing in gods a long time ago. Sure, I might offer the occasional sacrifice to Mars, but it's not out of faith. No, the one thing I believe in is justice. Roman justice. And if there is a God worth worshiping, he would be a God of justice. And that's what's made today so unbearable. I was awoken early this morning by one of my soldiers. At first I thought there was some sort of insurrectional riot going on. But no, apparently the chief priest and his cronies and the Pharisees had finally gotten a hold of Jesus of Nazareth. Now, I hadn't known much about Jesus of Nazareth before this week. He made quite a stir when he came into the city. But throughout the whole week, he had been teaching in the temple and making the priests and the Pharisees look like the fools that they were. I'd actually started to like him for that. But now they finally had him. And they were dragging him to our headquarters, demanding to see the governor so that they could put this man to death. It was my job to alert Pilate, who wasn't so happy about being woken up so early. And he came out and heard the story. They wanted this man dead. But both Pilate and I knew there was no crime this man committed. It was only envy that brought them here. So Pilate took Jesus and brought him into his headquarters and started interrogating him. But Jesus would make no answer. He wouldn't say a word. It was the strangest thing. So Pilate went back outside to the scribes and chief priests and said, "There's no reason for this man to be put to death. I'll punish him and then release him." But they said, "No, crucify him. This man claims to be the Son of God." Well, that made Pilate uneasy, and it made me uneasy. And Pilate rushed back into the room where Jesus was, and just as he did, he ran into his wife. And his wife came to him and said, "Have nothing to do with this innocent man, for I have suffered much because of him in a dream." Then Pilate, quite unsettled, asked Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world, and my authority comes from above." And I saw a look on him. It was not a look of fear, but of resignation and acceptance. Pilate went out one last time, pleading with them, saying there is no reason that this man should be put to death. But at this point, the chief priests and the scribes and the Pharisees had stirred up the crowd so much that they were chanting, "Crucify him! Crucify him. And seeing that he was getting nowhere, he took out a bowl of water and washed his hands. The coward. And said, "His blood is on you, not me." As if that could relinquish his responsibility. And he handed over Jesus to them and ordered me to carry out the sentence. We took him to the headquarters, as was standard procedure. I usually don't think anything of it when we flog and beat those we catch. But this man was different. He was no common criminal. And he didn't cry out for mercy. He didn't claim his innocence. He didn't respond with insults or hatred, but with silent acceptance. Every time the whip hit his back. As I rode on my horse behind him as they forced him to carry his cross, I burned with shame. I couldn't look up. This was not justice. This was not the way I knew. But still, we went. When we got to the place of the skull, the soldiers took his hands and stretched his arms, and under my orders, they nailed his hands to the cross. And myself, being the officer, I had to write out the sign above him that said, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." And it was then that strange things started to happen. As we looked at him raised on the cross, we noticed it was getting dark, though it was in the middle of the day. Not your natural darkness, but strange. And Jesus would say hardly a thing while he was there. And when he did speak, it was strange. And finally, after hanging on that cross for 3 hours, I saw that he was near his end. And I heard him say in a loud, gasping breath, "It is finished. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And he died. Suddenly there was a great earthquake that rocked us. My horse reared. I was thrown to the ground. There was a sound like thunder, and people were screaming. And then all of a sudden, there was silence. And as I looked at the cross, suddenly it burned in my mind how surely it was that this man was innocent. But then suddenly a thought struck me. And suddenly dread started to overcome me. As I thought, what if this man is who he says he is? What if this is a divine king? What if this is the Son of a God? And I knowingly put this innocent man to death. Suddenly, terror and despair overcame me, and I fell to my knees. And I realized what a guilty man I was. I was guilty of this man's blood, even if my hands hadn't pounded the nails, even if it hadn't been me who brought me here. I was guilty. I deserved this man's place. And if there truly was justice in this universe, I deserved to be where he was. And suddenly, I saw in my life not just this failure, but every failure and misdeed that I had ever done, and I felt naked and ashamed that I had no defense. I was caught between justice and death. I had no hope. But then suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder. And I looked up to see a man dressed like a Pharisee. And he said to me, "Take heart, Sir Centurion. There is still hope." But I said, "What do you know of hope? The blood of this innocent man is on my hands." And he said to me, "It's true, but not only yours. Many hands brought this man to his death, even mine. For there was much I could have done and did not. But I heard him say, as he was being lifted on that cross, 'Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.' And I believe those words are for me and for you, Sir Centurion." And then he went on to tell me something that Jesus had once told him long before. The Son of Man must be lifted up, that whoever believes in him would have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. I was confused. I said, "But justice demands a punishment. I must face justice." And he said, "Yes, justice does demand a punishment. And that's exactly why this Jesus came." He told his disciples many times why he came to this city. He knew that he would die. He knew that he would be nailed to this cross. And yet he did it anyway. You do deserve this punishment, Centurion. But he took it for you, willingly, so that you and all who trust in him could have life, and life everlasting. By his wounds we are healed. I didn't understand everything that he had just told me. But still I felt in my heart hope. And the despair and dread started to melt away. He said, "Come, Sir Centurion. My friend Joseph and I are going to go ask Pilate that we may honor his body and bury it. I'm sure the word of a centurion would go a long way." As I stood, I looked at the cross one final time. And now, instead of simply seeing injustice, I saw hope and even forgiveness. And I heard myself say, "Surely this man was the Son of God."